Hi and welcome to Swedish Plant Guys. We get a lot of questions from you viewers. We read all of them, but we're not able to answer your questions in writing because it takes too much time. So what we do is that when we've gotten a question a couple of times, we bundle them together and we make a Q&A video like this one. Now we've had a lot of questions about plant dormancy. What is it? Why does it exist? Can we skip that? And questions just concerning the dormancy of plants. So that is what this Q&A will cover. Now, if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do. Hit that bell as well so you get a notification every time we put up something new. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and share with your friends as well. So starting off, what is dormancy for plants? Why do we have it? And what should we do about it? And is it good for the plants? Can we take it away? Well, there is a lot of questions and we're going to try and answer as many of them as possible. Now, what is plant dormancy? Well, we usually talk about 2 periods of the year when the plant goes dormant. Now, dormant means that it stops growing. And basically, we can't see that anything is happening with the plant. We could also see that the plant looks a little bit stressed, or it could start to lose a little bit of its color. But these are all indications that the plant has gone dormant. Now, the 2 periods that we usually have is winter and summer. And when we talk about dormancy, it's easiest to talk about the outdoors because it's clearest there. Now, what happens outdoors is that we have seasons. And those seasons have different temperatures, different daylight times, and this affects the plant in different ways. Because we know that winter is coming, but how does the plant know? Well, the first thing that the plant actually reacts to is that the amount of light during the day gets shorter and shorter as we enter winter. This is one of the triggers for the plant, and it says, okay, it's time for that part of the year. Now, another thing it notices is that the temperature differs. So when we are reaching towards winter, the temperatures are usually going down. So we have a shorter daylight during the days, and we have temperatures that are going down. Now these 2 triggers what we call a dormancy period for the plant. But before it goes dormant, what actually happens is that what we can see that it stops growing. We've had a long period over spring and summer where it has been growing, becoming bigger, it's becoming a little bit thicker. A lot is happening. But all of a sudden it just stops. And it starts to prepare for winter. Because those 2 triggers have started to, the plant actually looks inwards instead. So it continues to produce sugars and starches to create that food for the plant. However, it doesn't send all of those nutrients, all of those sugars and starches up towards new leaves. What it actually does, it looks inwards instead. It starts to build up the vascular tissue inside of the plant. And it thickens up the trunk, and it starts to store sugars and starches inside of each cell. Now, why does it do that? Well, it's because the more sugars and starches you have within that cell means that the water inside of the plant actually can withstand more colder temperatures. So it's preparing for the cold temperatures in winter. This is the reason why some plants can withstand as cold temperatures as -20 degrees Celsius. Because it has a built-in system where it stores sugars and starches inside of each cell to be able to not freeze and die. Now, when that happens, when it's stored all of those starches and sugars and that cold period, the winter is coming, then it goes dormant. And then this is basically a resting period, because it doesn't get anything by trying to produce new leaves when it's cold outside. That doesn't work. It's not efficient. And everything concerning plants is to be as efficient as possible. So it goes dormant and it rests. But that doesn't mean that nothing is happening, because a lot of plants actually is active in the root system during winter if you don't have freezing temperatures where the root ball is frozen, because then also that part of the plant is dormant. So even if it doesn't happen anything above soil, it could be happening down in the soil. Now that is one of the dormant periods. And what then happens that when daylight starts to get longer and longer during the days again, you get warmer and warmer temperatures. That triggers the plant to say, oh, spring has arrived. It's time. And what happens is that all of those stored nutrients, all of those sugars and starches, everything inside of the plant, and that thicker, more healthier vascular tissue that it builds up in the autumn starts to produce new leaves. And you get that flush in spring where everything just explodes. But then we have, after that period, what happens then is that the temperatures continue to go up. And in the middle of summer, when we have as much heat as possible, the plant actually goes dormant again, but for another reason. And this time it's mainly because of the temperature, because all of that high temperatures means that every energy, everything that happens inside of the plant goes to doing one thing. And that is to move water in the system to be able to cool the plant down. And it does that by letting water evaporate from the leaves, and that way moving water inside of the plant and evaporating from the leaves. This is the cooling system of the plant. And that is all it does in the middle of summer, just to be able to cool it down. Then when the temperature starts to go down again, it triggers and says, oh, it's autumn. I don't want to create new foliage. It's time to prepare for winter again. And it starts to be active again, but inwards, creating that vascular tissue to become better, starting to grow more roots, preparing for winter. And you have that over and over again. So those are the two dormant periods in an outside plant. But I know you're thinking now, what about indoor plants? Because inside of our homes, we do not have a change of temperature. We usually have around the same temperature all year round. If you have a complete system in your home, you could have the exact same temperature all year round. So does our indoor plants go dormant as well? Yes, they do. Because what you still have is that when you have your plant and it's standing on your windowsill, it will notice that the daylight during the days, the sunlight during the days, the light, what it will notice is that the light during the day is going to become shorter. So that still can trigger the plant. And another thing inside is that when it gets colder outside, what happens inside is that our humidity inside starts to go down. And this is another trigger for the plants to say, okay, it's time to go dormant. Now the reason here is the same thing. It's not efficient for the plant during winter when you don't have enough sunlight and you have a very low humidity to continue on growing. It's more efficient to await more sunlight, more light, higher humidity. It's easier for the plant to grow and become bigger, stronger, and better. Now the plants we use inside, the tropical plants usually we use inside, they have different needs on how much dormancy it needs, how much dormancy it goes into. So it can differ from various different types of plants. But most plants actually go a little bit dormant. Now, what happens to the plants when they go dormant inside? Well, you can see that it stops growing, same as outside, but it won't start to lose foliage like some of the outdoor plants will. However, it stops to growing, but it starts to get more active in the root system. It actually does the same thing as outdoors. It concentrates inwards. It starts to build up a better root system, more roots, and also storing those nutrients to be able to, when the daylight increases again and the humidity goes up, to start to produce new leaves. That is the most efficient way for the plant to grow. Now also here in Sweden we have a quite cold temperature in wintertime, so the humidity inside actually goes quite low. And when the humidity goes to become very, very low, let's say about 30% indoors, this stresses the plant quite hard. And all of the energy that it has and that it doesn't use to produce new roots actually is used to be able to hold the water inside of the plant. Because since it's so low humidity inside, all of the water stored in the plant wants to evaporate out from the leaves. And this goes even more rapidly as the humidity goes down. So what the plant does is that it tries to close the stomatas. The stomatas are small window openings on the leaves that can regulate the water inside of the plant. And since the water really wants to evaporate, what the plant needs to be doing is it has to close those stomatas as hard as it can to be able to have the water inside of the plant. Some plants can't handle it if the humidity goes too low. And all of those stomatas just opens up, all of the water just evaporates straight out. And what you see is that, well, I have watered my plant. It has water, but it's wilting. Something is happening to it. And usually that means it can't hold the water. It's just moving through the system, out of the leaves. But most plants can handle this. They close the stomatas as much as they can, just opening a little bit to regulate that water flow. But all of that takes energy, and it doesn't want to produce new leaves at that moment. It just has to produce, it has to keep as much energy as it can, just keeping the water inside of the plant. Now, same thing happens in summer as in the outdoors, because when you have in the middle of the summer, you have a lot of sunlight, and it can become very, very hot next to your windowsill as well. Now, all of that heat in the summertime can also trigger the plant to go dormant. Same thing as in wintertime with the low humidity here, but here it's the heat instead. It has to concentrate everything it has on moving the water inside of the plant, using as much water as it can, trying to open and close to regulate that temperature inside of the plant. So could we do anything about this dormancy? Could we help the plant in some way? Well, first of all, the dormancy is not something negative. This is the natural way the plants work. They have this trigger that makes them go dormant because it's more efficient to grow at another time of the year. So it's not a negative thing. But what we can do outside, for instance, what we can do is that we can cover our plants with, it could be fallen leaves, for instance, to make sure that the root ball doesn't freeze as much. That is one way of helping the plant when it's dormant, so that it can continue to drink water and doesn't get completely frozen, for instance. And you can cover the foliage with something as well, That is outdoors. You can help the plant by doing that. Now, what can we do indoors? Well, one thing we could do is that we can put a humidifier indoors to make sure that that humidity doesn't go too far down. So we can help the plant not struggling as much. Another thing we could do is that we could put some grow light for the plants to make sure that it gets more light than it gets in the wintertime. This also helps the plant. However, I would never try to take away the dormant periods for the plant. And the reason is that this is fully natural. This is the natural way for most plants to grow. My experience of taking care of plants for over 20 years says that if you try and take away that dormancy period, what happens is that you get a weaker plant because it's active all year round and it uses all of those nutrients that you are giving the plant, and it never takes the time to look inwards. It doesn't get a better root system. It doesn't get a better vascular system, a thicker stem as much. It needs that dormant period to be able to grow as much when it doesn't need to use as much energy. But if it's active all the time, it actually gets a little bit stressed and you get a weaker plant. Now growers, for instance, when they grow plants in greenhouses, they can't wait for dormancy or allow dormancy because they want to sell as many plants as possible. So in the greenhouses, they raise the humidity, they add growing lights in wintertime because they need to sell more plants. But when you get that plant to your home, it's my advice to you to let nature take its course and let it have the dormancy times that it needs. And you will be rewarded with better, bigger, and more healthier plants. Because if you stress it a lot, if it doesn't get that resting period, it will be more prone to get pests, root rot, and other things that can attack and injure your plant. Now the last thing I want to address is that some plants actually have longer dormancy periods. Now the most usual ones are the ones that are controlled with the seasons of the year. But some plants, and I have one here, like the CC plant. This plant doesn't really follow those periods. The CC plant can grow just as much in wintertime indoors as it does in summertime. But all of a sudden, it just stops, goes dormant. And then it doesn't produce new leaves for maybe 6 months, maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years. It can go up to 2 years before it produces new leaves again. And what it's doing is it's not resting. What it's doing is it's storing sugars and nutrients and starches, and it's storing it in the tubers inside of the plant as well, so that when it goes active again, when you see, then it will just explode and you will get 4, 5, 10 new leaves at a time. And that takes a lot of energy. So when it's done that, and when those new shoots are starting to become mature, then it goes dormant again for quite some time until it's ready to produce again. So some plants doesn't follow that timeline. It follows its own dormancy periods. The pothos is another plant that can have these irregular dormancy periods. So to just summarize, let the plants be plants. Let nature take its course and never push a plant to start to grow more. Let it just do everything you can to make it feel as well as you can. Just follow all these instructions we have in our videos. Try and make everything for your plants and let them grow in their pace. And they will reward you by becoming bigger, healthier, and less prone to diseases, pests, and all of those problems we do not want to have. Now that is all for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and please give it a thumbs up. Now if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do, and hit that bell so you get a notification every time we put up something new. And if you have more questions for us, do you want us to make a Q&A video like this on another topic? Please mention that in the comments as well. Now until next time, hej då!